Rubs, we're back with the 17-Mile Horror by Gessler, and I hope to finish this tonight and get it over with. I think I only have 20 pages left, maybe 23 pages. Chapter 17. Let's get this going. That ain't gonna do it, bro. That ain't gonna do it at all. Let's get the Napoleon out here. Come here, Napoleon. Get your ass on there. Chapter 17. It was 8 o'clock as Pete stepped out the side door and walked to his car. He had on a white t-shirt, cut-off shorts, and sneakers. Carl watched from the dining room window as the car stopped on Church Street. Pete made a left and continued on until he reached the intersection of Church and Mill. He made a left on Mill and traveled the half mile to Hines Drive. After Pete's car was out of sight, Carl walked warily into the kitchen without saying a word to Sarah, who was at the drain board and had her back to him. He slumped into a chair at the kitchen table. When Sarah heard the chair legs scrape on the tile floor, she turned and was surprised to see Carl sitting there. "I didn't hear you come in. Where have you been these past few hours?" Carl lifted his head from his hands and said, "I've been all this time preparing the body for the viewing room. I just now finished. I don't mind telling you, me dear, I'm bushed." Sarah walked over to the table. "Was that Master Pete's car that I just heard leave?" "Yeah, that was him. He's on the way to the park." "That's fine. I know that you're tired, dear, but Chief Guthrie wants us out of this house tonight." "And where do you propose that we go?" "I just checked the movie guide. The Sound of Music is playing at the Pen. I'd like to go and see it again. The show starts at 9. That will give us time to change and you a chance to shower. Sarah," Carl had a pained look on his face, "do we have to leave the house tonight? I don't think that I can stay awake through a whole movie." "Carl, if you want to help Chief Guthrie catch Master Pete and put a stop to these killings, then you do as he says. He has to have the house to himself. It's as plain as that. If you have to sleep through the movie, then that's the way it'll have to be. Now come on and take your shower." Carl and Sarah were just crossing Church Street when Sam pulled up in front of the mansion. Instead of pulling into the circle drive, he drove past the mansion and parked on the street, 2 houses away. He walked around to the rear entrance. He tried the door and found it unlocked, just as he had arranged with Sarah. Sam walked down the hall until he came to the ramp that led to the basement. As he stood before the door to the embalming room, the deathly silence of the large mansion seemed to engulf him. The hair on the back of his head stood up, and a sudden chill came over him. Sam had a fear of funeral homes that went back to his childhood days. When he was only 8 years old, his uncle died. He didn't want to see his uncle in the casket. As most children that age, he had a fear of dead people. He asked his mother to let him sit at the back of the room, but she insisted that he go up to the casket and give his uncle a kiss goodbye. He had been terrified and was led screaming to the side of the casket. His mother forced him to lean over and kiss his uncle. He broke free of her grasp and ran screaming from the room. His father found him in the men's lounge, cowering in a corner, sobbing hysterically. It was an experience that remained with him for the rest of his life. Sam opened the door to the embalming room and stepped inside. What he saw caused him to step back in horror. Sitting in front of the embalming table with the top and bottom cover open was a bronze coffin. In the dimly lit room, he could just make out the face of the woman that Carl had just made up. He had dressed her in the clothes that her relatives had given him. It was Sam's intention to go through the embalming room to the secret staircase and up to Ginny's bedroom. Sam froze where he was standing, unable to move his feet. To get to the door that led to the wine cellar and the staircase, he would have to walk around the corpse. Sam took a deep breath and slowly started to walk toward the coffin. When he reached the coffin, he tried to avoid looking into it, but somehow his eyes were drawn to the body lying there. He looked at the face of the woman and noticed that she looked like she was sleeping. Carl had done an excellent makeup job. With the various creams that he had used, he was able to give the pain-racked face a look of serenity. As Sam looked at the woman, his fear suddenly left him. She looked so peaceful laying there that a feeling of compassion came over him. He tore his eyes away from the corpse and walked through the door that led to the staircase. He walked up the dimly lit stairs and stood on the landing behind Ginny's bedroom. He reached up and pulled the lever that actuated the sliding panel. He found a piece of wood that was on the floor of the landing. He picked up the short piece of 1x2 and weighed it between the sliding panel and the wall. His idea was to leave the sliding panel open for Nancy when she ran up the stairs from the embalming room. He didn't worry about Pete wondering why the panel was open when he came looking for Nancy. He figured that Pete, in his demented state, would not notice the open door. Sam went to the closet and removed the soiled dressing gown and laid it on the bed. He looked at his watch. It was 9:15. If all went well, Pete would have what he thought was his next victim back in the mansion in about an hour. Sam sat down on the bed in the musty room and waited. Tony and Nancy were driving down Hines Drive on their way to Merriman Hollow. Nancy had borrowed her parents' car. They had just picked up Nancy's girlfriend and her boyfriend and were on their way to the picnic site. The girl was a waitress at Walter's. She had started there only a few months ago and was popular with the crowd that frequented the restaurant. Although she wasn't extremely attractive, she had a fantastic figure. Butterface. Nancy remembered what Sam had said. Pete had to be aroused before he went after the girls. Well, if this gal doesn't arouse him, no one will, she thought. Nancy didn't tell the girl what was about to happen. Hey, you're going to get abducted. She figured if Sam was right, and she hoped that he was, the girl was in no danger. She had given a great deal of thought as to who she was going to choose to be with her and Tony in the park. Since she had black hair, the girl had to be either a blonde or a brunette. Jerry, the waitress in the restaurant, was a natural blonde. The guy she was with, in Nancy's estimation, was a creep. He had long hair almost down to his shoulders and was as skinny as a rail. He was well into pot and speed and an assortment of other drugs that even Nancy was not familiar with. As she looked in the rearview mirror, she could tell that he was already spaced out on something. One thing for sure, she thought, he won't have any trouble acting out his part. He was already there. Where are we going to party down? Jerry asked. Nancy turned around in her seat to answer the girl. We're going to Merriman Hollow. Kick ass, Jerry said. That's where all the action is. Tony looked in the rearview mirror and smiled at the girl's last remark. In the 4 years that he had spent at the school, he had been out of touch with the customs and sayings of today's young crowd. Tony looked at what the girl was wearing and couldn't believe that she would go to a public place like a park dressed as she was. She certainly isn't leaving much to the imagination, he thought. Jerry had on a bright yellow string bikini. The top just managed to cover her nipples, leaving a large amount of flesh exposed. The bottom consisted of two triangular pieces of material held together by a yellow string. Her so-called boyfriend had on a Rolling Stones t-shirt and a dirty pair of cut-off shorts. Tony noticed that when he got in the car, he was barefooted. Nancy was dressed in a conventional bikini. She had gone to a boutique in Plymouth and picked out a white outfit. She figured if it was her job to attract Pete's attention, she had better stand out in the darkness of the park. Tony bought a pair of Levi's and had Sarah cut them off her crotch. She complained at first, telling him that it was a waste of money, buying a new pair of pants, then cutting them off. Thrift store. When he explained to her that he had to look like the rest of the kids in the park, she finally agreed. Tony pulled the car into the parking area of Merriman Hollow. Thank you, eBay. The site was crowded, but Nancy noticed an empty table sitting at the rear of the area next to the bushes. Tony had bought 4 6-packs of Pabst. Nancy had told him that it was the beer that most of the kids drank. He didn't care much for beer himself. He was a 7-and-7 man, but in order to go along with the plan, he bought the beer. Tony carried 2 of the 6-packs to the picnic table. Nancy, who had a blanket and a frisbee under one arm, could only manage one. Jerry's boyfriend, Chuck, who was so bombed out that all he could do was stagger toward the table. When she asked him to pick up the remaining 6-pack of beer, all he could do was to mumble something and stagger away from her. You asshole, she thought. Why the fuck did I ever ask you to come along? They piled the beer on the table. Nancy took the blanket. and spread it on the grass. How about some frisbee? Nancy asked Tony as she picked up the shiny red disc and playfully tossed it in his direction. Tony picked up the frisbee, which had fallen at his feet, and walked toward the tall row of bushes. If you're back there, Pete, old buddy, he thought, I hope you're enjoying the show. Pete arrived at Merriman Hollow at 8:15. He pulled his car into a dirt road that was adjacent to the play area. He followed the road to another dirt road that ran along the river. He made a left and parked behind a tall row of bushes. He liked the site because the bushes were about 8 feet tall. The trees that lined the river were over 30 feet. When you looked in that direction from the play area at night, it was pitch black. He found the small opening in the bushes and laid down on the grass. He watched as about 10 couples romped and cavorted in the grass of the play area in front of him. He scanned the crowd. He saw a black-haired girl in a t-shirt and cutoffs on a teeter-totter with a young boy. No, she wouldn't do. She was short and fat. His eyes gazed on two couples that were laying in blankets to his right. He couldn't make out their features. All he could see was the color of their bikinis and bare flesh that were illuminated by the bright moon overhead. He stared at these couples, suddenly aroused by the sight of bare flesh. He watched as one girl, who had her back to him, got up on her knees and undid the straps of her bikini, letting it fall to the damp grass. When he could see the color of her hair, he looked away, disappointed. She was a blonde. He was very selective. The girl that he was about to abduct and later kill had to resemble his sister. In at least two of the last abductions, it had taken him 3 days to select a girl. He glanced at his digital watch, 9 p.m. No sense hurrying, he still had an hour. As he glanced over the happy couples, his eyes caught the flash of something white. He looked to his right and saw Nancy and Tony and Jerry and her boyfriend walk toward the picnic table situated only about 20 feet from where he was laying. He looked at Nancy as she neared the table. He did not recognize her. In his demented state, he only knew that the girl resembled Ginny and she had black hair. He saw Nancy throw the frisbee to Tony and then saw him walk toward him. When Tony was only about 5 feet from the bushes, he turned around and threw the frisbee back toward Nancy. Pete held his breath. Tony was so close that he could almost touch him. After Nancy and Tony had thrown the plastic object about a half dozen times, she motioned to Tony to come back to the picnic table. Well, what do you think? She said as she sat on top of the table. Is he out there? I don't know. Tony reached for a Pabst and pulled off the tab. Here, take one. We're supposed to be partying down. Nancy took the can of beer and took a long swallow. She reached in her purse and pulled out a plastic pouch and some cigarette papers. Where do you get that stuff? Tony asked, shocked by what he thought he saw. Don't worry, Nancy laughed. It's only tobacco in a plastic pouch. Tony watched amazed as Nancy held the paper in two fingers, poured the tobacco from the pouch into the paper, wet the paper, and gave a twist to each end. She handed him the fake joint and rolled another for himself. I mean, if this guy's even got a half a brain, he knows the difference between tobacco smoke and marijuana. Light me, she said, after she had completed her joint. Tony lit her cigarette with a cigarette lighter he had brought along, then lit his own. Nancy looked down at the blanket and watched as Jerry uncorked her second beer and took a long swallow. Her boyfriend was lying on his back with a beer in one hand and a real joint in the other. He was mumbling something incoherent. Come on, baby, Jerry coaxed, running her hand along his chest. Be nice to me. She took the joint from his mouth and took a deep drag, holding the smoke in as long as she could to get the full benefit of the drug. She took the joint out of her mouth and replaced it in his. He made no move toward her. Her eyes, which were glazed from the speed he had taken previously, his eyes, which were glazed from the speed he had taken previously, and the joint he was smoking now, stared at the full moon overhead. Jerry put down her beer and reached behind her and undid the snap and held her bikini top together. The garment fell to the blanket, releasing her generous breasts. She leaned over Chuck and moved her breasts across his face. The boy was oblivious to her actions. He continued to have that blank expression on his face that indicated that he was in another world. Overcome with passion, she reached down and unzipped him. She reached into his cutoffs and removed his limp penis and started massaging it. The boy did not respond to her hands' energetic Action. She leaned down and let her tongue touch the tip of his limp tool. When she got no response from that, she took all of him in her mouth. You rotten creep, Jerry said disgustedly, slapping at the falcid? The falcid. He spelled flaccid wrong. Penis with her hand. I would have gotten anyone I wanted to party down with, and who did I end up with? A goddamn pothead that gets bombed out of his skull before I get any cock. Jerry, who by now was feeling the effects of the pot and the two beers, staggered to her feet and walked over to the picnic table where Tony and Nancy were watching the action. When she reached the table, she stumbled and lurched into Tony's arms. Tony, who was unaccustomed to seeing a girl half nude, found himself with Jerry's arms around him, her breast pressing against his chest. She noticed the bulge in his pants and placed one hand on his crotch. All right, Jerry, Nancy pulled the girl away from an aroused that your boyfriend freaked out on you, but don't think you're getting my date. Come on, Nancy, Jerry smiled at Tony. He's got enough for both of us. Nancy got mad. Get the fuck out of here, Jerry. Go find someone else to party with. Two's company, three's the crowd. Jerry gave Nancy a dirty look, then turned and walked over to a group of couples that were engaged in an orgy at a table closer to the main road. I'm gonna have to look up in the newspaper and see if this was going on at the park at that time. Hey, gang, she shouted, can I join your party? One of the young men, who was busy kissing a blonde, broke away from the girl and looked in Jerry's direction. Hey, baby, come on over, he said as he saw Jerry's half nude body stagger toward him. Well, Nancy said after Jerry had joined the couple's act. What are we going to do? Tony asked, flustered. Well, for openers, I'm going to try and look like I'm partying down with you. With that, Nancy undid the snap that held her top together and let the flimsy garment fall to her hands. Tony let out a gasp as he saw Nancy's breasts exposed. She had a full figure. The excitement of what she was doing caused her nipples to jut out from her breast as if they were standing at attention. Nancy, you've sure got some beautiful boobs, Tony was at a loss for words. Well, thank you, Tony, Nancy smiled at him. I'm glad you like them. What's not to like, he said as he put his arm around her, letting his hand cup one breast. Ah, Tony, you're getting me horny, she said as she began to be aroused by Tony's movement. Well, isn't that supposed to be the idea? Not exactly, she said as she moved away from his grasp. We're supposed to be pretending. Oh, I'm sorry that I offended you. Tony removed his arm from her shoulder. It's not that, Tony. Nancy put her hand on his knee. I've wanted to get it on with you from the first time I saw you, but not here, not like this. I hope you understand. A big smile crossed Tony's face. Yeah, I understand. I guess that I feel the same way. I can't see getting it on with a girl with the whole world watching. Sam said that we have to get Pete aroused. It's what turns him on before he goes for the girls. How do you propose to do that? Tony asked. I've got another blanket in the back seat of the car. Go get it for me, will you? When Tony brought the blanket back to the table, Nancy got off the table, put her arms around him, and gave him a long kiss, letting her tongue explore his mouth. What? What was that for? He gasped. That was for Pete's benefit. She took the blanket and started to walk around toward the bushes, a bewildered Tony close behind. Nancy laid the blanket on the ground then. With one quick movement, she undid her bikini bottom and let it drop to the wet grass. She arched her back, causing her breast to move upward. She fell to the blanket and held her hands up to Tony. Come on, baby, she cooed. Let's get it on. Following her example, he slipped off his t-shirt and let his shorts fall to his ankles. He laid down next to her, then pulled the blankets over them. What do we do now? Tony whispered. I don't know. You've got me all shook up, Nancy whispered, suddenly aroused by Tony's nude body lying next to her. What's that? Tony asked. They listened and could hear Pete's quiet moans coming from the bushes. It's him, Nancy said in a whisper. He's right behind us. Tony, hold me. I'm scared. Tony held her to him. All thought of sex had left his mind. Just a few feet from him, a monster was waiting to get Nancy, the monster who was once his best friend. Nancy, you can't go through with this. He'll kill you. Don't take that chance. Tony's body was shaking as he whispered to Nancy. Tony, I have to, for Pete's sake. If we don't help him, he's going to get killed. Listen, I'm scared, but I have to do this. Get up, put on your shorts, and tell me that you're going for more beer. We have to give him a chance to get at me. When you get to the table, don't look back here. I hope it'll be over in a hurry. I'll meet you back at the mansion. Oh, Tony, hold me. Tony held her in his arms for a minute. When he realized that she was going to go through with Sam's scheme, he did as she asked. He got up from the blanket, told her that he was going for more beer, then walked slowly back to the table. Pete, shorts down around his ankles, had expended himself into the bushes. His body was trembling. When he saw Tony follow Nancy to the blanket, he thought that he looked familiar. He tried to remember where he had seen him, but his clouded brain would not let him remember. The girl was beautiful, far better than any he had before. He must have her. He watched as they put the blanket over them. He tried to imagine what was going on under the cover. He saw Tony get up and tell the girl that he was going to get some more beer. This was his chance. He prepared the chloroform pad. When he saw the boy reach the picnic table, he made his move. He slowly crept up to the blanket. The girl was still covered. With one hand, he pulled back the blanket. With the other, he placed a pad over her nose and mouth. She exerted pressure on her shoulder, but found that she didn't resist. In a few seconds, he felt her go limp. He pulled her nudie body, that's obviously a misspell, nude body through the bushes. One of the branches from the bushes brushed against her arm, causing a thin stream of blood to form. Quickly, he had her in his car and was on his way to where he had the van parked. Bob Klein was half asleep in the scout car. He and Officer Olinsky had been sitting watching the young people party down at Levan Knoll. At first, he got a kick out of it. He had never seen girls walk around half nude, and in some cases, nude. He watched as they rolled their joints and drank their beer. He glanced at his watch and noticed that it was almost 9:45. The park closed in 15 minutes and still no sign of the killer. As he sat there, the conversation that he had with Sam came back to him. He had been all fired. He had been all fired nice. The hell is fired nice be about him? Be about? He had been all fired nice about letting him ride with one of his officers. That wasn't like Sam. Bob was convinced that Sam knew who the killer was and was not saying. And yet, why would Sam allow him to come to the park and observe? Suddenly it came to him. When Olinsky had mentioned that they were going to watch Levan Knoll, it didn't set right with him. He said nothing and went along. Hello, Brobs. Now he remembered all the research that he had done on the killings. Levan Knoll was not the site that the killer was going to strike next. It was Merriman Hollow. Olinsky, take me over to Merriman Hollow. Why, what do you mean? The chief said to stay here and not go to Merriman Hollow. And I'll tell you why. That's where the killer is going to be, not here. Sam's pulled the con job on me. He wanted me out of the way. Now get me over there. He's probably got the girl by now anyway. Olinsky pulled out of the Van Knoll and drove the half mile to Merriman Hollow. Klein was right. It was almost closing time, and he had done what he was told. What harm could it do to take him over there now? They had almost reached the picnic site when they saw Pete pull onto Hines Drive on his way to where he had the van parked. As the speeding car passed them, Bob recognized Pete. "Stop!" he screamed. "That's him. That's the killer. Turn around and try and catch him." Olinsky came to a slow stop and made a U-turn on the drive. You like the incredible, but I'm going now. I'm leaving now. All right, bye. Olinsky came to a slow stop and made a U-turn on the drive. He followed a procession of cars going in the opposite direction. If that was the killer, he had better keep this nosy bastard away from him. Sam had a reason for wanting to keep him from knowing who the killer was, and if he valued his job, he'd better do what he was told. "Can't you go any faster?" Bob shouted at the officer. "He's getting away." When they had gone a few more blocks, Bob knew that it was useless. He was gone. If he was right, and he was sure that he was, Pete would go back to the funeral home. "Take me to the Worthington mansion," he ordered. "Can't do that. I'll take you back to your car. Orders is orders." When Bob got back to the city hall, he got in his car and headed over to the mansion. "I've got you now," he said to himself. Chapter 18. Sam opened the rear door and let Dr. Schwartz in. He led the way down the long hall and up the stairs to the second floor. When they reached the landing, the door stopped. The doctor stopped. Sam was about to open the door to Ginny's bedroom when he turned and saw the doctor standing on the landing with a strange look on his face. Dr. Schwartz, Sam walked over to where the doctor was standing. What's wrong? I feel a very strong presence here. The doctor's eyes looked around him as he spoke. A very strong. What do you mean? Sam asked, dumbfounded. Yeah, great. See you, buddy. I feel a very strong presence here. The doctor's eyes looked around him as he spoke. A very strong. What do you mean? Sam asked, dumbfounded. There's something here with us. I can feel it. A cold chill went up Sam's spine. He had never heard the good doctor talk about ghosts before. Dr. Schwartz, do you mean that you feel a ghost, a spirit present? Let us say that it is an entity, not as you call it, a ghost. Sam's old fear came back to haunt him. His knees turned to jello. Let's go in her room. He stammered as he opened the door to the musty room and entered it, the doctor close behind him. Do you feel it now? The doctor asked as he stood in the center of the large bedroom. Sam felt like he was being engulfed by some unknown force. It was as if it were suffocating him. He found it almost impossible to breathe. Yes, I feel it. I can hardly breathe, Sam gasped. It's her, Dr. Schwartz whispered. It is her presence in this room. I feel that she is very disturbed. What does she want? Sam felt foolish talking about a spirit. She wants her freedom. She wants to be released from this earthly plane. Doctor, if what you say is true, and it is Ginny's presence we feel here, why is her spirit still here? Why isn't it where all the spirits go? Because, my good friend, she feels responsible for what has been happening. I don't understand, Sam asked, bewildered. How can she blame herself for what Pete is doing? Because even in death she blames herself for the boy's actions. He has been killing these girls so that he can keep her image alive. Since that first time when he kept her embalmed body here at her dressing table, she has been earthbound. She has been in this house since the day that she died. Sam was suddenly overcome with fear. He sat down at the dressing table. His hands started to become clammy. A cold sweat started forming on his brow. This was the one thing that he had not planned on. A ghost or spirit or whatever. This was something that he was not equipped to handle. He had asked the doctor to be present when Pete was apprehended, so that if there was any serious reaction on Pete's part, the doctor would be here to help him. He was sitting at the dressing room table with his back to the mirror. He suddenly felt that someone or something was looking at him. He slowly turned and looked into the mirror. What he saw caused the blood to drain from his head. A face started forming in the mirror. He jumped off the stool, sending it crashing to the floor as he stood up. Doctor, look! Do you see it? He gasped as he pointed to the image in the mirror. It is her, Dr. Schwartz whispered as he walked closer to the mirror. They could see the face clearly now. It was not the face of a decayed corpse, but rather the image of Ginny as she looked before she died. What are we going to do? Sam asked the doctor, terrified at what he was seeing. Ginny, is that you? The doctor was speaking to the ghostly image in the mirror. The face started to fade away as the doctor spoke. No, don't go away, the doctor implored. We are here to help you. As they both watched, the mist started to form again, and they could see her face clearly now. The once sparkling blue eyes were dim and clouded. The face was racked with the pain that she had endured. The lips were turned down into a sad frown. As they looked at the apparition in the mirror, the image slowly started to fade away. The mirror became cloudy. Then, as they watched, words started to form on the mirror. I will end it all. Then the mist cleared and they saw their own reflections in the mirror. Sam was frozen to where he was standing. He could not move or speak. After what seemed an eternity, he finally managed to gain his speech. What does it mean? I will end it. I believe that I know what she has in mind. The doctor walked to the south end of the room, where an old-fashioned love seat was placed against the wall. Come, we sit. He motioned to the seat. Sam walked over to the doctor and sat down. She knows that you are going to try and trap Pete. I believe that when the girl sits in the chair in front of a mirror, she will take over the girl's personality. You mean Sam couldn't believe what the doctor was implying. Then when Nancy sits in the chair, it won't be Nancy he talks to, it'll be her? Precisely. It is the only way that she feels that he will listen to reason. But Nancy, Sam asked, is she in any danger? No, I don't believe she will harm her. Sam, there is something that I must confess to you. What do you mean, doctor? Sam was surprised by what the old man was saying. For a period of 2 years, I treated Ginny Worthington in my office. She was a sexually frustrated girl. She wanted a meaningful relationship with a man. However, because she felt that it was her duty to raise a boy, she deprived herself of the one thing that she needed most, a man's love. These frustrations affected her thinking. She became selfish and told Pete that it was wrong to have sex. She convinced him that sex was dirty. This is why the boy felt the way that he did. He loved his sister and did whatever she wished. A week before she died, she came to see me. She was filled with remorse. She told me she knew that it wouldn't be long before she died. She had an intuition, a feeling. She blamed herself for the ways the boy felt. Then she told me an astonishing thing. What? What was that? Sam was aghast at what he was hearing. She told me that she felt that because she and her brother had such a strong relationship, he would reach out for her even after death. That is why, when you come to my office to tell me about the Heinz Park killer, I knew who it was. Sam was speechless. He, of course, had no way of knowing that Ginny had been a patient of the doctor's. She had never confided that fact to him. He couldn't blame her. After all, it wasn't something that you told your friends. What surprised Sam even more was the doctor's involvement with the supernatural. He had known the doctor a good many years and had no inclination that the doctor was interested in the psychic. As they sat there in the semi darkness of the room, the only light coming from the glare of the streetlights that surrounded the circle drive, the closeness that Sam had felt before was gone. Although the room was still musty, Sam was once again able to breathe normally. It was as if Ginny's presence had left. Do you feel that? Sam whispered. I think she's gone. No, my friend, she is still here. She is not overpowering us, viz. Her presence. That is all. As they sat there in the deathly stillness of the room, they heard a knock coming from the front door. Who the hell is that? Sam swore as he got up and walked out onto the landing. Sam opened the large front door and saw Bob Klein standing on the porch of the mansion. What the hell do you want? Sam said angrily when he saw who it was. Sorry, Sam. He pushed his way past Sam and stood in the foyer. I know that Pete's our killer. I also know that he's coming here with his next victim. Sam closed the door. He turned around and with one hand pushed Bob up against the foyer wall. Now you listen here, you son of a bitch. What gives you the right to come busting into a person's home and making accusations like that? Sam was livid with anger. Sam, I didn't come busting into anyone's house. I've got a right to ask questions. I know that Pete's the killer and I intend to write the story. Bob tried to act as if Sam's attitude had no effect on him, when in reality he was terrified of what Sam might do. Sam looked at the cowering figure and realized that there wasn't time to argue with him. He expected Pete at any moment, and he didn't want to have this hotshot reporter spoil everything that he had worked so hard to set up. All right, Klein, he took his hand away from his shoulder. You're here, so you're going to get your story. But believe me, it's something that is going to shock the shit out of you. Come with me. Bob followed Sam up the staircase to Ginny's room. When they entered the dark room, Bob could make out the figure of Dr. Schwartz sitting in a chair at one end of the room. Why, Dr. Schwartz? Bob was surprised to see the old man. What are you doing here? Zo, my young friend, you have also figured out who our killer is. I don't understand, Bob said as he sat next to the doctor. How are you involved in all of this? I believe I will let Chief Guthrie explain since this is his idea. Sam stood before the two men in the semi darkness of the room. and told Bob of the elaborate plan that he had conceived a month ago to trap Pete. When he was through, he noticed the expression on Bob's face. He appeared to be dumbfounded, not really believing what he had heard. Sam walked over to the bed and removed the mask from a box that he had carried it in. Holding the gruesome mask by the hair, he walked back to where the two men were sitting and held it in front of Bob's face. He recoiled as if he was bitten by a snake. Good God, he shrieked. Take it away, it's awful. Bob covered his face with his hands in an effort to rid himself of the grisly image. Sam took the mask and laid it on the bed next to the dressing gown. He returned to the two and said, You're going to see a lot worse than that if Dr. Schwartz is correct. Now listen to me. Bob took his hands from his face and looked up at Sam. His face was white. Yes, yes, he whispered. I'm listening. We're all going to hide in that closet. Now, no matter what you see, I don't want you to make a sound. Is that clear? Bob was terrified. He didn't like what Sam was implying. What what is going to happen? I think it is better if you did not know, Dr. Schwartz answered him. Sam is right. It is imperative that you remain absolutely quiet. If something is said, it could be disastrous. The sound of a car could be heard coming into the circle drive and coming to a stop at the side entrance. Sam walked to the bay window and looked down at the black van. He watched Pete get out of the van and walk to the rear doors. It's Pete. Let's get in the closet. Now remember, not a sound. Pete carried Nancy's nude body in the side entrance down the ramp and into the embalming room. He laid her on the cold stainless and embalming table, steel embalming table. He walked to the light switch and flipped it on. Immediately, her body was illuminated by the bright light. Pete walked to the side of the table and looked down at Nancy's exposed body. With one finger, he traced an imaginary line around her face, down her throat, along her shoulders to her breasts. A twisted smile came over him as he continued his fingers downward journey to her navel. He outlined the navel and continued to her pubic area. His finger probed the black pubic hair. The journey finally ended when he had explored her thighs. You're the most beautiful of all, the insane voice hissed. He moved her head to one side and felt for the artery in her neck. Yes, yes, that's perfect. Now don't go away, my dear, the strange voice said. I'm just going into the next room for a minute. I'll be right back. When Pete had lain her on the table, she wanted to leap off and run out the door, but she controlled her fear and laid still. She almost opened her eyes when the cold steel of the table touched her bare flesh. She wanted to cringe when she felt his fingers explore her body. When he bent over her to inspect her neck, she could feel his hot breath. It took all the self control that she possessed to keep from screaming at the top of her lungs. Now she saw her opportunity. She leaped off the cold table and looked around the white tiled room. She saw a door at one side of the room. She ran toward it and pushed it open. She saw a stairway at the end of the wine cellar. Her body felt cold as she ran through the old room. She stumbled as she reached the stairs, hitting her head on one of the stones that lined each side of the staircase. She held her hand to her head and felt a thin stream of blood running down her face. She brushed it aside and started up the stairs again. When she reached the landing behind the fireplace, she could see the open panel. She ran through the opening into the darkened bedroom. She stood in the center of the musty room, letting her eyes become adjusted to the darkness. When she could begin to make out objects in the room, she noticed the large canopied bed. She walked over to the bed and saw the dressing gown and the mask lying next to it. She picked up the hideous mask. In the semi darkness of the room, she could make out the features. She turned her head, revolted by the sight of it. Sam stepped out of the closet and started walking over to her. Nancy gasped and took a step back. Nancy, it's okay. It's me, Sam. He walked over to her and noticed the blood on her face. What happened? Sam asked as he touched the small gash on her forehead. I tripped on the steps. Oh, Sam. She put her arms around him and pressed her nude body close to him. I'm so scared. Sam felt awkward holding her naked body in his arms. He must have made quite a picture for the doctor and Bob, who were watching from the closet. He gently pushed her away from him and put his hands on her shoulders. Now, Nancy, don't worry. You've done fine so far. I'll be right there in the closet. Nothing is going to happen. It'll all be over before you realize it. Here, put on the gown and the mask and sit at the table. He helped her with the gown, and as she was sitting at the table, helped her put on the gruesome mask. They no sooner had the mask in place when they heard footsteps coming up the stairs. All right, Nancy, this is it. Don't forget. I'll be right there in the closet. Good luck, honey. Sam joined the doctor and Bob in the closet. I mean, Sam could have just arrested the motherfucker by now. He already took her in a van, naked, to his house. Sam joined the doctor and Bob in the closet. They could hear the footsteps coming up the staircase, then stop on the landing behind the fireplace. As they peered out of the partially open closed closet door, they could just make out a figure entering through the sliding panel. Pete walked into the darkened room. From the glow of the street lamps on the circle drive, he could make out a figure sitting at the dressing table. He walked over to a light switch on the wall and turned it on. Ginny, it's you. I knew that you wouldn't go far from me. The voice was not Pete's, but that of his other self. He walked up behind Nancy and put his hands on her shoulders. He looked down at her hair and began stroking it. You have such beautiful hair, Ginny, such nice, black, shiny hair. Then, for the first time since he had entered the room, he looked in the mirror. The gruesome, decomposed face that stared back at him sent shockwaves through his body. He jumped back from the chair that Nancy was sitting in and covered his face with his hands. When he removed his hands, the grisly image was still there. No, no, it can't be. You were so beautiful. Your face so smooth. Oh no. What happened to you, my dearest Ginny? Pete started sobbing. His body started convulsing, as if he were an epileptic having a seizure. The room suddenly turned cold. One of the bay windows flew open, and a strong wind blew over a lamp sitting on an end table, sending it crashing to the floor. Nancy, who was just about to go into her act, looked at her grisly image in the mirror. Through the slits in the mask, she saw what looked like a mist starting to form around her head. As she looked closer, she could make out a face. The eyes were pale blue, but sunken in their sockets. The lips curled up in a hideous grin. She let out a soft moan as she saw her image leave, and the other face take the place of her. She felt some force, something take possession of her body. Unwillingly, she turned around in her chair and faced Pete. In a haunting voice that seemed to be coming from the grave, she spoke to Pete. Look at me. Look at me. This is what you have done to my body. You have turned me into an abomination. Is this how you wanted to help me? Pete, who was on the verge of collapse but shaking violently, took a step toward the horrible creature that was speaking to him. I didn't mean to, Ginny, he cried like a baby. I only wanted to have you with me, Ginny. I didn't want you to leave me. You selfish, sniveling brat, the grotesque mouth hissed. You never thought of me. It was always you, you. I gave up everything for you. And when I died, I was so happy I was finally rid of you. I finally had my peace until you brought me back again and again. You killed innocent girls just because you couldn't face your life on your own. Well, Peter, since you won't let me leave this plane and enjoy my just peace, then you must cross over and join me so that we can be together. Come, Pete, come to me. Come, Peter. Join me, Peter. Nancy's spirit possessed body started backing toward the open bay window. Yes, Ginny, I'm coming. Pete seemed to be in a trance. His eyes were fixed on the ghastly apparition. He slowly followed the figure toward the window. The figure was now suspended in air outside the bay window. Come to me, Pete, come to me. But with me, be with me always, the voice hissed from the hideous mouth. Come to me, Pete, come to me. Be with me always, the voice hissed from the hideous mouth. There, I corrected it. It sounded awful the first time. Pete continued to follow the figure. When he had almost reached the window sill, his body went hurling headlong through the open window. Sam ran out of the closet, followed closely by the doctor and Bob. When he reached the bay window and looked down, he could see Pete's body lying on the roof of the side entrance. As he looked closer, he could see the head. It was twisted almost halfway around. Oh, my God, Sam groaned. Oh, my God. The doctor looked out the window at the twisted figure on the roof. You had better not look, the doctor told Bob as he tried to look out the window. I've got to see for myself, Bob said as he pushed the doctor aside. Oh, no, he gasped. It's awful. He turned from the window and staggered to the bed, overcome by the horror. Send an ambulance to the Worthington mansion right away. Sam had regained his senses. and called the station. Do you think he's dead? Sam asked the doctor. I can't be sure, but from the looks of his neck, I'm afraid so. Oh, they heard a moan coming from the dressing table. When they looked in that direction, they were shocked by what they saw. Nancy was sitting at the dressing table with no mask on her head and nude. The gown was gone. Sam looked around the room but could find nothing. He went to the closet and took another of Ginny's gowns and placed it around the shoulders of the girl, covering her nudity. As he looked down on the floor next to the dressing table, he saw the mask. He picked it up and laid it on the bed. What happened? Nancy was holding her head in her hands. There, my dear. The doctor put his arms around Nancy. Come, zit over here. He walked her to the love seat and sat her down. He went to his bag and took out a bottle of pills. After getting some water from the bathroom down the hall, he gave her a pill and had her take a sip of the water. Now you will come with me, and we will go downstairs to the study. After you have had a little nap, I will explain it all to you. Sam and Bob followed the doctor out of the room and down to the first floor. As they reached the study, they could hear the ambulance pull into the circle drive. He's on the roof, Sam pointed to Pete's body. How in the hell did he get up there? Jump? The ambulance attendant asked. You might say that, Sam said. They found the ladder in the garage and placed it against the porch roof. With Sam and his partner holding the ladder, the attendant made his way to where Pete was lying. I don't know how, but he's alive, he called down from the roof. After the ambulance, with Pete's twisted body in it, had left for the hospital, Sam and Bob went back into the mansion. Sam went directly into the study. The doctor had found a blanket and laid it over Nancy, who was already asleep on the couch. Will she be all right? Sam asked, a worried look on his face. Yes, I believe so. She will have some bad memories about what has happened here tonight. I will have to help her, but I believe she will overcome them. Doctor, he's alive. The fall didn't kill him. The doctor looked at Sam, then down at his hands. Strange, very strange. Come on, let's let her sleep. I know where Carl keeps a bottle of brandy. I think that we could all use a drink. Chapter 19. Wait, there's more. Chapter 19. It was a half hour since the horror of what happened in Ginny's bedroom. They were all sitting at the kitchen table, not saying anything. Sam refilled their glasses and set the almost empty bottle on the table. I just can't believe that what I saw was real, Bob finally broke the long silence. I'm afraid, young man, that it was real, very real, Dr. Schwartz said, sipping on his brandy. You are very fortunate, you know. Fortunate? How could you say that? Why, that thing scared the shit out of me. That thing, as you call it, was a manifestation of Ginny's spirit. It is very rare that anyone is allowed to witness such a materialization. Doctor, I'd like to ask you a question. Yes, by all means, go ahead. In all my research on this case, I've been led to believe that Ginny Worthington practically worshipped her brother, and yet that thing up in that room, that hideous monster, why, you could just see the hate oozing from her lips. Dr. Schwartz pulled his tobacco pouch out of one of his suit pockets and his meerschaum pipe out of the other. He filled the bowl, lit it, before he answered Bob. As I have told Sam, I believe that I know more about Ginny Worthington than anyone in this town, and we got more and more into her mental condition. As V got more and more into her mental condition, it became clear to me that she resented the boy. After all, Pete was draining her not only physically but emotionally, viz. His constant dependence on her. He smothered her, suffocated her. There was no escape for her. That is why I think that when she came to me just before she died, she was trying to tell me that she welcomed death and the freedom that it would bring to her. I thought he moved to New Jersey for mortuary school. At least that's what I thought the book said. You mean that she wanted to die? Bob asked, surprised at the doctor's supposition. Yes, eagerly. It was the only way that she could see that she would be free. However, she didn't think that Pete would continue to have a hold on her, even after death. What's this? MOLX. Boo. What's up, bruv? Excuse me, doctor, but in my book, when she died, she severed all ties with the living. Isn't that so? My dear young man, the doctor smiled as he tapped out his pipe in the ashtray on the table. That is the way it would happen to most souls. However, when a soul or spirit feels that its work on this plane is unfinished, in many cases, that soul or spirit is earthbound until what is disturbing it can be resolved. You mean Pete's dependence on her even after death? Exactly so. He called on her every time he killed a girl and tried to put the girl in his sister's place. Then he continued the killings. Her love turned to such a hate that the only way she could see to justify the torment that he had put her through was to make him suffer too. But she tried to kill him. Wasn't that a pretty drastic step for a once loving sister to take, even a ghost? I do not believe that she tried to kill him. The doctor refilled his pipe. If that was the case, then he would already be dead. For all we know, he died on the way to the hospital. After all, the way I look at it, you can't live with a broken neck